Welcome into Basketball by Association. My name is Arky. It's right there on the screen. That is Joel C. Cortez. Joel, his name's also on the screen. Joel, how are you, sir?
1/3 of my name is on the screen, but we'll take it for today. It's been a long time. I'm glad to talk some hoops right before the playoffs begin. We got like 8 games to go for most teams. It's getting crazy now.
Yeah, well, let me. There's two basketball / not on the court specific things I want to get to. One is the breaking news: LeBron James's kid is entering the draft. Also, the transfer portal. He gets to also maintain his college eligibility, which is it's an NBA newly collectively bargained rule that they're able to do.
Yeah.
So LeBron James's kid might come join his dad next season, huh? Joel Cortez, how excited are you to see father-son team up, which will definitely happen?
I do believe it'll happen at some point. I don't know that it'll be next year. They've already, both LeBron and Bronny have said that that's not a condition to him coming in. If they're going to say that publicly, then for it to somehow be like privately under the radar a condition, that's going to get out there and that's going to be mud on their face. They're smarter than that. So I do think it's about him just trying to get into the league. And obviously, on the one hand, this is a nepotism play, like a kid who's averaging less than 5 points a game and 2 assists. You declare for the draft and everybody goes, big deal, and you probably don't get drafted. You maybe get a training camp invite if as a freshman there was some upside there. It's the name that's going to get him looked at as many times, and it's the fact that he's got representation by Rich Paul and Clutch Sports already. He has connections and advantages that other kids don't. But to be fair to Bronny, the cardiac arrest and the health scare, the things that happened earlier this year, not his fault.
Well, he was out for 5 months. He was out for 5 months.
You do feel for the kid in that regard. And he was a higher considered prospect to those things happening. They robbed him of his chance to really get on the court and show what he can do. And so now you're almost treating him like a high school prospect, a kid that you judge based on what he did in high school. And the college experience is irrelevant. So I'll let you go first. I got a couple more thoughts, but yeah.
I was just going to say, well, first of all, he can come back to college, right? Like, he can come back to USC.
Which I'm glad they allow now. I'm glad they allow that.
USC just hired Eric Musselman, the Arkansas guy, who has had a lot of success in college. So, and he's also developed a couple of pretty good guards there too. So maybe you come back there for him. Maybe you also come back because you can get a little more NIL money because you got a big name there for himself.
Duquesne is the other university that's being mentioned with Bronny, just because here again, it's a LeBron James contact that's been promoted to head coach over there. Yeah. And again, this is the type of advantage that a normal college kid doesn't have, and Bronny does because of his name. But I appreciate the efforts, at least the lip service, to say he's trying to do this on his own. He doesn't care where he's drafted. He doesn't really even care if he's drafted. It's to find out where he might go, and he just wants to get in on the right team, and he's willing to play G League. That's also a good sign. If he's saying, look, I'm willing to come in and be in a system for a couple years, even if it means I'm in the G League, that there is a humility there that speaks beyond maybe the initial nepotism concerns.
Yeah, I don't want to get too deep more into this. I just wanted to sort of speak in overall terms. But he was a good high school player, not a great high school player. He wasn't a transcendent type player. He knew there was a guy that's going to have to be developed if he was going to have to get there. Then you had the cardiac scare, which took away a lot of his time and ability to be able to develop.
Right.
And then you have sort of this uncertainty with what you're going to do. I mean, this is what a lot of kids do anyway, even if they're now most kids don't come back when they get into the transfer portal, so he's probably going to be gone. Although this is an interesting case because it was a coaching change that might be interesting to him to be able to come back. So, I hope the best for the kid, just because I think anytime you talk about cardiac issues, that can humble somebody real quick. Like no matter what level of life you're in, and he's just starting his life, so. Yeah. Maybe he had, I don't know anything about him beforehand, so I don't know if he had a bit of an ego on him, if he thought he was better than he was, but maybe some of that humility comes from saying, hey, look, I almost lost everything kind of thing. So, if I get a chance to continue to play basketball at another college, or if I get to play in a system somewhere and get to develop in the G League, I'm willing to do it because I'm I'm lucky to be here. So
And final thought for me on this, I agree with everything you just said. There's going to be a lot of hoopla because of the name. There's going to be a lot of overanalysis, but really what I see here is just a kid weighing his options, right? Tell me where I could go. Tell me what scenarios I have in front of me. That includes at the college level. It includes multiple colleges. It includes at the NBA level. Can I even make a roster? Am I going to be in the G League forever? Just getting more information is never a bad thing, and a player advocating for themselves, regardless of their last name, is a wise thing to do. He does have a few more tools to be able to weigh this sort of,
I want to move forward to congratulate Joel C. Cortez on what is about to be the coronation of his Minnesota Timberwolves, being the regular season champion. Now,
don't
you
jinx
may
us.
say it's
Don't
only
jinx us yet.
you may say it's only a half game lead, and you may also say that there's 6 games left. But
Mhm.
I may also say that
including a matchup with the Nuggets, who they're a half game ahead of.
I will also say that Los Angeles Clippers of Los Angeles have been doing work for you, including last night, to be able to get you that half game lead again.
Mhm.
But also, this Minnesota team clearly is for real. So just a quick congratulations to you. That's all. And a quick melancholy for me, since now we get to talk about one of the topics I wanted to get to. The fact that Julius Randle is going to be out for season-ending surgery on his shoulder. He apparently, according to reports, rehabbed like a mofo, trying to be able to get back into it. And doctors told him, if you keep doing this, it's going to be a very good chance that you're doing further damage. So he's shutting it down for the year. It's really, really too bad. Now, granted, the Knicks did, the Villanova Knicks last night did great in their win. It's hard to see this Knicks team being the championship contender without Julius Randle. Also, this team, they were 12-1, right, with Anobi and with Julius Randle on the court at the same time.
And they hadn't even got Mitchell Robinson back yet, so you wonder adding him back into the mix in that front line defensively, especially, could have been a good thing.
You can't lose a poor man's MVP like that and just expect to come back, I think, and be anywhere near the caliber that you were thinking. It's really disappointing to sort of have that news, because I always had sort of that carrot. The Knicks have been sort of middling there around, they got up to third like earlier this week, or maybe it was late last week, up in the standings, and then they get 4th, 5th, somewhere around there. They've been sort of playing around with. They've been
You and I kind of picked them for the 2 or 3 seed, and that was before the Anunoby trade. Preseason, we looked at that roster and went, "Ooh, this could be good."
Yeah, and that's just such a big piece to be able to lose. Now, the only positive I can say really about this is they've been without him for a while. Like, they have been able to have chance to be able to figure out who they are, and they just semi-recently got Anobi back into the lineup in the last few weeks. So they've been able to sort of figure out what that team can look like with that Julius Randle. It just, to me, feels like the depth isn't completely there without such a huge loss to that roster, especially. That is a heartbeat kind of guy for the Knicks and for Tom Thibodeau. And I just wanted to say that I'm praying for you, Julius. I want you to. Maybe you still come back. Maybe. Maybe this is all a smoke show.
I think you meant Mitchell Robinson has been back for a couple of weeks. There's Anunoby they're still waiting on. He has not been back, or at least is listed out. I don't know if he made a couple of appearances and then they shut him down.
No, Anobi came back for a little while.
Okay. Yeah, he's listed as out. Mitchell Robinson is back in. Anunoby hopefully is 100% healthy by the time the playoffs begin. Surely, like you said, he doesn't replace Julius Randle, but he does give them something they didn't have prior to all that. And then you've got Bojan Bogdanovic, who the Knicks are still trying to figure out how he fits. That's a little bit concerning, because I keep seeing him play 12, 13 minutes a game, and that's a guy who, especially if you're a dinged-up team looking for some offense, should be playing 24, 25 minutes or more per game as a shooter. But the Villanova Knicks, they're fitting in that starting lineup. I like Tom Thibodeau's flexibility to go, you know what? Maybe we can play small ball. Maybe we can play with 1 big and 4 guards out there, because Josh Hart is so rugged defensively and can guard bigger players. It's opened up a lot of different things. You're going to get that same flexibility when Anunoby is in the lineup. We don't know if Mitchell Robinson will start or not, but Isaiah Hartenstein was hurt for a while. I think some of this injury issue has let them unlock Miles McBride a little bit more. He's put up some really productive minutes for them. All that to say that it's not doom and gloom, as in this team is for sure a first round out. I do think, especially sitting in the 4-5 seed, regardless of who the Knicks play in that spot, they've got a puncher's chance to win a round here,
Oh yeah,
which would still be to salvage something. And you know, if you're facing Orlando, a team that hasn't been there, and you and I are both impressed with Orlando, they're ahead of schedule. They've got some wisdom there on that team, in addition to the youth and athleticism. But let's be real. I would still pick New York in a first round if they're playing Orlando. If they're playing Indiana, yeah, nobody wants to see that. And nobody wants to see, if you're New York, you don't want to see Miami in the first round if they climb up. But you still give the Knicks a chance in either of those series. I would still give them a chance, although maybe less so in a rematch against Cleveland if it came to that. But beyond the second round, you get into the semifinals, and now it's more cream of the crop type of teams, or teams that have found momentum in the first round. That's where losing Randall, I think, takes away the ceiling to this team. And it is unfortunate because it truly was a roster, and hopefully next year can still be a roster that looks conference finals bound.
Yes, in that last part. And I would rather wait to sort of see what the playoff seeds would look like to sort of start projecting at that point, because if you ask me, essentially, no one really scares me if you're the Knicks, except for Boston. Boston might run you out of the gym. I don't know what I would think about. Milwaukee has tons of talent, but Doc Rivers has had tons of talent before, and this has not been a great Milwaukee team this year.
No,
especially since Doc Rivers has gotten there.
Yeah,
right. They were really bad going into the All-Star break. They got really hot right after the All-Star break, and they've been really bad again, including like losing back-to-back games against
bad
Washington
teams
and teams that are 71 games under 500.
Yeah, they're 5-5 in their last 10. They have zero momentum right now. They did not address their defensive issues.
That's what's so odd about they're the 2 seed right now, which tells you a little bit about the East, that it's super top heavy with the number 1 team, who has been great. And then everybody else has just sort of been trying to find some kind of rhythm throughout the year.
They've all had their issues, right? Yeah. They've all had major things. Philly, Miami, New York now have had major injury issues. Indiana has had some injury issues, and then a Tyrese Halliburton slump after the All-Star break. Cleveland has had injury issues. Orlando has their youth. Milwaukee has had some injuries, and like you said, the coaching stuff. So yeah, every single team. And then Chicago and Atlanta have just been meh, so inconsistent that you can't take them seriously at all. So you're absolutely right. Every single team is flawed, and the Knicks have a big flaw right now, missing Julius Randle, but they're not that much more flawed than any of their other opponents.
Yeah, so if the Knicks somehow, well, it would depend on where they went into the season. So let's say if the Knicks got a favorable enough seeding to where they were able to get to the conference finals, that's going to be Boston. That's going to be really hard for them to be able to win that series. But first and then semis, I don't think it's impossible for them to be able to win. I just don't think that with Julius Randle, I think they could have beat up Boston a little bit and made it tough for them to get through them.
They'd have a shot. I agree. They'd have a shot. They're a more rugged team than Boston is.
Yeah. But let's move on, if you don't mind, for Boston real quick, because Boston just went ahead and just wrapped up the number 1 seed and everything this last week. They're just good. They're 30-3 at home.
I hear that's decent these days.
Let me ask you this. We haven't talked a ton about Boston because they've really not had a bunch of struggles this season. They've been supremely good, and it really hurts me to say something like this. I really needed them to struggle some more, and they just haven't. What are they right now? 60-16. And they're probably going to win 64, 65 games. No one's really sort of, I feel like, talking as much about this Boston team because I think we've seen them be good in the regular season before, and now it's time to be in the playoffs. But as far as this regular season is concerned, I just want to ask you, do you agree with me in my assessment that I think the way they have won this season, it's been one of the more impressive regular seasons Boston's ever had, at least since I've been alive, that I've been watching. A regular season.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought.
They have crushed in the regular season. And we're talking me watching since like 94, 93, 94, 95, so mid-90s.
Yeah, I mean, that's a franchise that certainly has racked up 60-win seasons, although a lot of times when you go back and look, it's been high 50-win seasons. Even during their glory days, most recently with Ray Allen and Paul Pierce and KG. I think, 60 wins, it's impressive, especially given the parity in the East and the fact that the West is really good. that the best team in the West only has 53 wins, and that's Minnesota, which is, it's saying something. So to get to 60 in this atmosphere, and then to do it with a nearly 12-point differential, that's the big thing.
The point.
When they win, they win big, and they've won a lot big.
They clinched the 1 seed by being OKC by like nearly 40.
Granted, OKC was resting a lot of guys coming into that game. That was not
it's hard to beat anybody by 40. Like, these are professional basketball players. Granted, I feel like we've seen a lot more 35 and 40-point victories this year than in the last several years. But still, Boston wasn't resting anybody. I mean, who was? Is it? Yeah, no, Porzingis. Porzingis is the one who goes for 27 and 12 in that game,
right?
And that's part of a 35-point win.
What's impressive to me is that, first of all, Porzingis is upright at the end of the season, knock on wood, and he's had to take some time off, as you would expect. I think it's a Joel Embiid situation.
We all thought that when they made the decision to pick him up. Yeah,
it's a Joel Embiid situation. It's a Karl-Anthony Towns situation. These are bigs who are going to miss 20 games per season. You just hope that it's 20 manageable games and that they're spaced out, that they're, reasonably priced games, so to speak, and not at the end of the season and final. And so Porzingis to stay healthy, and then you put him in a starting lineup that has 3 of the best defensive players in the NBA, plus one of the NBA's preeminent scorers in the prime of his career, and a bench which, while a little bit shaky, still, you've got Al Horford, you've got Peyton Pritchard. Those guys have been in the Boston system forever. They know their roles. They are pros. Xavier Tillman is a guy that really played some good basketball in Memphis as a fill-in and as a rugged guy. And I think getting a body like that, like Tillman, was something that they were severely lacking. If you remember at the beginning of the season, I kind of questioned Boston's toughness, not their willingness to try to be tough, but just did they have the right personnel against a New York or even against a Cleveland, teams that have really physical front lines, and that's just kind of the way they play. Boston didn't feel like they matched up. Getting a guy like Tillman, and then whatever you get out of Al Horford, gives them the ability to throw in some bodies to play that kind of style. And then to me, the big one is Sam Hauser becoming a credible NBA player. He was a guy that they had in the rotation, like, okay, the kid can shoot, but can he do anything else? The jury's still out about whether he can do anything else or not, but he has been passable defensively, and he's been shooting the lights out for them on a team that already has 3-point threats all over the roster of guys who can knock down shots. And then Jason Tatum, at this point, we have to consider him a specialist. I mean, he is a guy at that upper level where he is a 3-point shooter. And Sam Hauser is a specialist as well. So they've got the goods. I mean, that's the thing. It's not just, oh, this is a down year in the East. Oh, Boston had 2 guys who are really playing well. No, they've got good chemistry. They've got good balance. They've got ability to attack you, and now they've got.
That's what's different this year, I think, than last year. Yeah, this team is incredibly better than they were last year, and that's what I think makes them the clear favorite to come out of the East this year. Now, especially with everyone's injuries. I don't know if there is a team right now currently constructed in the East that could win 2 games against them in a series. Not right now. They are 17-4 since the All-Star break. All 17 wins have been by double digits. Like, they are just, when you talk about trying to get hot at the right time, getting through the dog days of the basketball season, going into the All-Star break, then coming out of it, they've come out like a cannon. Now, granted, they do have that huge one black eye. It's a very small black eye compared to everything else when they had a ginormous lead and blew it against Atlanta. Outside of that, I mean...
But Atlanta did that to Minnesota, the top team in the West, too. Minnesota had a 25, 26-point lead on them early in the season. Atlanta came back on them, too. So the Hawks have shown the ability to do this against some really good teams that if you let off the ropes, the Hawks are a team that can score. They have been for years. They just don't do anything well.
What do you think about the East having basically their entire playoff set as far as the teams that are going to be in, with a couple weeks still left in the season?
It's not entirely surprising after Brooklyn and Toronto pulled the plug. I think both of those teams, had they stayed constituted the way they were, they would have been the ones in the mix yet. But they were middling and really didn't see much light at the end of the tunnel, and so they.
But the whole point of this was like to keep everybody basically in as long as possible, and we still got 2 weeks left in the season.
Well, you've kept 10 teams in, and that's saying
But I
something.
mean, to keep more teams like as
Mhm.
a potential, right? Like, what was it? Was it 2 seasons ago that like going into like the final week there were like 13 or 14 teams that could have gotten in?
Right,
Like
which
that.
is why I look at this as an outlier. You look at Toronto and Brooklyn and the fact they would have been there, but these are circumstances where both teams had tried to run roster iterations for a couple of years and were getting to the end of the line with those roster iterations, and it just so happens this is the year where they decided to cut bait. So I do look at the last couple of years where it's been 11, 12, 13 teams still in the mix, and in the West right now it's 11 teams. I still see that as a victory, and this is an outlier. If this keeps happening, then it becomes a trend. But I don't read too much into it this year.
I don't know if I read anything to it this year. It's just more like it's just an interesting, like, oh, that's kind of like you have the one team that's been so much better than everybody else. They're like 13 games above everybody else, and then at the very bottom, it's like, it's everybody else. Like it's everybody else. We've already got the entire playoffs basically figured out as far as the teams that are going to be in. And to be frank with you, there's probably with only this much time left, we're probably not going to see a lot of movement seating wise either. Like there could be a little bit for like maybe that 9-10 spot, and maybe you see
The
a
6-7
3,
spot,
4,
it's got some
5.
wiggle room too.
Yeah,
6-7's got some wiggle room.
It's a little, but all these teams have kind of been 500-ish, a little above, a little below over the last few weeks. I don't know if we're going to see a lot of movement from where we are now, which is an interesting thing to be able to tell you that I guess the Knicks are going to go through Orlando to get to the championship. I guess that's how it'll go. So
that's not a bad place to start. I mean, if you have to pick a matchup, Orlando's a good defensive team too, just like New York is. In fact, they're built very similar. Paolo Banchero actually reminds me of Julius Randle in many of the best ways of a young Julius Randle. Banchero maybe has a little bit more versatility to his game, but Randle is really good at what he does, and Banchero can do a lot of that stuff too. So, yeah, they're both two good defensive teams. They're mirror images of one another, and you're going to see, I think, the veteranship of the Knicks really test Orlando and see what they're made of, and that's what you want in the first round.
Let me ask you this. Let's go to the West for just a few moments, if you don't mind. There actually is a little bit more intrigue there, with 3 teams battling for the number 1 spot within one game.
They've all been flip-flopping for that number 1 seed over the last 2 weeks. It's been crazy.
It's been a wild run. Denver has sort of gotten hot and gotten up to that 1 seed, and then obviously they got against the Clippers last night and lost that game. And then so Minnesota's back at the top, and we've seen OKC be up there this season too. It's going to be one of those teams that's going to be your number 1 seed. And those 3 teams are probably going to be your 1, 2, 3 in some order. So which team do you think has the staying power to end this season as your number 1 seed?
Looking at the schedule, and I had just had that pulled up here early, Minnesota.
5 and 6 games left in the year. So
yeah,
there's 5 for Denver, 6 left for Minnesota, and same for OKC.
I'm going to try to simplify this, and it's probably oversimplifying it, but I think the winner between the upcoming Denver-Minnesota matchup, which is in Denver, both teams are going to be on the second half of a back-to-back. That's Wednesday, April 10th.
Yeah, that's
the winner of that game will be your number 1 seed. The Wolves, they don't have an easy road to go. They've got to face Phoenix twice. Phoenix is very motivated to win games right now. They see the Lakers once. Minnesota has done very well against the Lakers when they've been fully constituted. The only game they lost was a game that they had nearly all of their starters shut down, and they just kind of had to play walking wounded. They see Washington once. They see Atlanta once. And again, as aforementioned, Atlanta beat them early in the season by clawing back from a 26-point deficit that the Wolves blew. So,
and Atlanta has, they're stuck in the plate. They're stuck in the plate. Never mind. So they can't get one of the top 6. I was trying to see where they at from 6. Oh yeah, they're 7 games back. Never mind. You're fine.
Yeah, I see Oklahoma City. They've got Indiana, Charlotte, Sacramento, San Antonio, Milwaukee, Dallas. It is an easier road, but a few of those teams have something to play for, and the Thunder have some games to make up. They're the ones sitting in third. Minnesota already has the tiebreaker over OKC. I haven't looked to see whether Denver's got the tiebreaker over the Thunder, but I think they might. Denver, on the other hand, has only 5 games left to go. They've got Atlanta, which is winnable. They've got Utah, which is winnable. They've got Minnesota once. They've got San Antonio then, which if Wemby is still playing, it's a winnable game, but it's toss up. And then they've got Memphis on the season closer. So Denver's got the easiest road to get there, the fewest games to ride, and really only one super high quality matchup left. But I do think Minnesota's been locked in. They've been taking care of business. They're going to win enough of these games to where it really does come down to that April 10th matchup. Because if they don't win it, Denver's got the clear path. You know, the Nuggets, if they win April 10th, they've already got the clear path to take the one again.
How surprised are you to see that this Minnesota team has been here from moment one to start the season, that they have been this good this long, and we really haven't seen elongated lulls from them? They have been super efficient and effective. Anthony Edwards has continued to explode as a star in this league. They're good. They've been good. We've seen them. We thought they were going to have a chance to be good last year and go through, and they sort of had that moment. We've talked about that before on the show. But how surprised are you that this year they've been able to go, not necessarily wire to wire, but essentially wire to wire for the whole year? They've been up at the top.
I think they lost a couple of really tough games in the opening week and a half, and they got called to the carpet by their veterans. They got called to the carpet by their head coach, Chris Finch. And coming into the season, it was all about being professional. It was about being consistent. They were one of the 2 teams that went undefeated in preseason. So they had been talking the talk. But then they got into some of those early regular season games, and it was more of the same from last year. A team that built big leads routinely, clearly had tons of talent, and then would blow close games. And I think that happening early in the season got them locked in, realizing the next level to go to. Anthony Edwards has led by example defensively. He wants to be the best defensive player on a team that already has a 3-4-time defensive player of the year in Rudy Gobert, and has got really solid defenders in Mike Conley, in Jaden McDaniels, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker. These are guys who are considered in the top 3 to 5 at their positions as defensive players, or at least were at various points in their career in the case of Conley. So they've got studs, and they have built their identity around being a defensive team. So it was surprising to see how good they were and consistent and professional they were up until the All-Star break. To say, okay, they're walking the walk now, not just talking the talk. The light bulb has gone on. Is this sustainable or not? But by the time they got to the All-Star break, you're going, no, this is the identity of this team. They're proving that. It's not a young team. That's one of the misnomers. Everybody thinks, the Minnesota Timberwolves, they're up and coming. They're rising. They've done a really good job of balancing this team with a lot of been there, done that veterans to support a young guy like Anthony Edwards or a young guy like Nickeil Alexander-Walker. And again, Karl-Anthony Towns is not a young guy. He is a veteran in the middle of his...
years old at this point. Comparatively speaking, like he's been out of Kentucky for a long time. So like this guy is supposed to have been able to take that next step eventually, right? And you're sort of just waiting for it to happen and waiting. And all you had to do was essentially make Anthony Edwards the man and make everyone realize that he's the man, surround him with a little more veteran talent and experience. And they've sort of gotten as much as I think you could get out of this team. This is so much more of a pleasant surprise than I was expecting for this team.
To their credit, when Towns went down, that was something that happened late last year too. And
fair.
That has the same type of impact on the Timberwolves ceiling ultimately as Julius Randle going down does for the Knicks. Minnesota can get the number 1 seed. Their ability to advance to an NBA Finals is going to hinge on whether Towns can come back, be healthy, and slot back in. But to their credit, Naz Reid averaging 23 points, 7+ boards a game in the starting lineup since he took over for Towns. Kyle Anderson has been averaging double figures points-wise. Those 2 guys on the front line have stepped up. Everybody else has bumped their scoring. Rudy Gobert has bumped his scoring a little bit, and they've been looking for him. Like, this is a team that finally figured out over training camp how to play together. I've mentioned this before. The leading assist guy to Rudy Gobert all year, despite the fact that Mike Conley is like his guy, they are locked in. Conley is always throwing lobs to Gobert, but the leading assist guy to Gobert all year has been Karl-Anthony Towns. Like they have figured out how to unlock it. Yeah, Towns has been the leading guy all year. And Gobert already has a good connection with Conley. Kyle Anderson works really well with Gobert, too. And Anthony Edwards has been able to set him up. So they've figured it out. And it's not just allowing Anthony Edwards to be the man on offense, but they made Rudy Gobert the quarterback defensively. Instead of him trying to fit into a scheme, they built the entire defensive scheme around this guy, which makes sense, being that he's a multi-time defensive player of the year. But they also made him the vocal leader defensively. And that has paid enormous dividends for a team that, as I mentioned, already has some really top flight defensive players, in addition to some guys like Kyle Anderson and Monte Morris, who are very solid defensive players, even if they're not elite. When you can build a team identity off your defense like that, it's rare in today's NBA, but to be able to do that, but to be able to do that all season long, which they've done, and then you've got a transcendent superstar who still has some rungs left to climb in Anthony Edwards, and you have the best shooting big man of all time in Karl-Anthony Towns. You got something, but they need Towns back. They need the full complement of players. Or if you remember last year too, Towns was hurt. Naz Reid got hurt, was not able to finish the series. They didn't have Jaden McDaniels because he had broken his hand at the end of the season. They were not whole last year. This year they're a lot closer, but Towns is the missing link, and you got to cross your fingers that nobody else goes down.
Okay, so I want to ask you one more question, and then I want to end on one other topic. So the question I have for you is, now that we have a couple weeks left in the season, 5, 6, 7 games for everybody, what do you predict that might be of interest to note for the last couple of weeks of the season? I'll start if you want to hear sort of an example for me. I think that my prediction going for, now this is just for the season. This isn't going to the playoffs. We'll talk about the playoffs stuff when it's time. But this is just for the season, for the end of the regular season. I think we're going to see a good shot at Philadelphia getting themselves into one of the top 6 spots. Getting Joel Embiid back is huge for them. He's played really well since he's been back. He's only been back for a minute and a half, so like we don't have a ton of data back on him. But once he's been back, it is a massive get for Philadelphia, who has been floundering, to be nice to say with Philadelphia since he's been out. Getting him back with the last couple of weeks of the season to go is going to be huge. And I think they're going to make up a couple of games, and they're going to be able to be one of the top 6 seeds. And
do you think they steal it from Indy? I mean, they're only a game back of the Pacers. Do you think that's the team that falls out of the top 6, or is it somebody like Orlando or New York who's got a little bit more of a cushion?
I think it's going to be Indy. I think because they only got basically one game to be able to put. I think it's 3.5 games or something that between Orlando and New York, and it's just not enough time. New York's probably going to go 500-ish, probably go 4-2, 3-3 or something in the way. And Orlando's been solid this whole time. They came out of the All-Star break hot, so it's one of those things where I think
they're 7-3 in their last 10.
Yeah, I think the only big movement that we're going to see is going to be Philadelphia steal that spot from Indy with Joel Embiid being back.
I'll go in the East as well and say I think Cleveland steals the number 2 seed for Milwaukee.
Ooh,
the Bucks are in some trouble now. Granted, the Cavs have been 4-6 over their last 10, dealing with injuries.
I mean, it's a great time for Cleveland to make that move.
Yeah, but the door I think is wide open. Milwaukee does not really know who they are. Damian Lillard has been in and out of the lineup. There's a lot of pressure on Lillard having come in and the expectations for this team. It's the whole type of pressure that got Adrian Griffin fired in the first place. Doc Rivers has not been the answer, which we knew he wouldn't be.
Boy, it's so fun to be right immediately. We
didn't want to be right. We wanted the Bucks to be good. That's one of those teams that you and I have had a soft spot for ever since we started.
Why did the Bucks make that decision? Of all the teams that are going to, why did the Bucks have to be the team that made that? Boston should go back and make that decision again. That would help me out. Not Milwaukee. Milwaukee's a likable team, man.
Yeah. I'm not thrilled about their chances. I'm not thrilled about their mojo right now. They'll compete. They'll be in the mix. all is not lost. But
do you think they can pull up the reins and not find themselves punched out in the first round? Like, can they rally the troops, so to speak?
Yes, but right now they're on track to play Miami in the first round again as a 2-7 matchup if Miami would get out of the play-in and stay in the spot that they're in. That is not the matchup if you're Milwaukee that you want to see, because there is a psychological edge there that got your coach fired, and now you're 2 coaches later, and you're seeing that team in the first round again. You don't want any part of the Miami Heat if you're Milwaukee.
If I'm right, if you and I are right, the Philadelphia jumps into that 6th spot, and you're right that Milwaukee drops back to the 3 spot and Cleveland takes their spot. Now it's Milwaukee, Philly, and now you got another fun rematch there. That's probably going to be a weird, interesting mental moment there for Doc Rivers and company.
And either team that loses that first round, you think about the expectations that Milwaukee and Philly had going into this year and over the last 4 or 5 seasons. To lose in the first round, yes, it'll be against a quality opponent if that happens, but it is a monumental disappointment if that goes down. And if Milwaukee loses to Miami again, like,
game's over.
That's
yeah.
Yikes.
Okay, last thing I wanted to mention before we got out of here, the retirement of Rajon Rondo was made official by Rajon Rondo, who brought it up on a podcast this week. Now, granted, we haven't seen him on the court in a while. It's been almost 2 years since we've sort of seen him on the court, so it was unofficially official. But I don't think we've really had a chance to sort of talk about what we think his legacy will be and what his sort of impact on the league will be once it's all said and done. And now it's all said and done. So for someone, he said that he had a great time. He loved every moment of being in the NBA. I question some of that, but
yeah. Did he forget about the Dallas and Indiana sojourns? Because he didn't seem to be having much fun at either of those spots.
So what do you think now that Rajon Rondo's no longer got any shot at coming back to the NBA? What do you think is his legacy as the National Basketball Association alum?
His legacy will forever be tied in part to that Boston Celtics team that put the Celtics back on the map. He was one of the young guys. Him and Kendrick Perkins were in that starting lineup with 3 all-time veterans, and there was major questions about whether these young guys were in over their heads. And both Perk and Rondo acquitted themselves very, very nicely during that high point for the Celtics. They played like veterans. They did their jobs. It wasn't always perfect, but they were integral to those good years for Boston and those contending years. And then I think the other thing for me that's a legacy for Rondo is the peak Rondo, the playoff Rondo.
Rondo.
He's one of those guys who's going to be remembered for about a 2.5 year span of dominance, of brilliance, of something that if you were there and you got to watch him play, you'll be like, oh man, was he good? And that will overshadow the fact that that was a brief blip in time. It was a brief moment. He was not a guy who played at that level when he was younger because he wasn't ready yet and he had all those veterans in front of him. And he did not play that way ever again after he was, traded by Boston. They were kind of on the down and outs. There was beginning to be some friction between him and the coaching staff. And he was as much damaged goods, remember, by the time that he was leaving Dallas, that whole thing blew apart. I thought that was going to be a match made in heaven with him and Dirk Nowitzki. But when that blew apart and then all of a sudden he's on Indiana and he's bouncing around, he was as much damaged goods, both as a head case and as a can he even still play type of question, as James Harden was at his lowest point, as Kyrie Irving was at his lowest point. Rondo was a pariah, and he slowly worked his way back to being a good teammate by reputation, a guy who was willing to come off the bench, do whatever it takes, teach the young guys. He righted that, and to his credit, nobody will really remember this, but to his credit, the dude got another ring, and he got it in LA with the Lakers, of all people. Like, he's one of those rare players who got a ring with the Celtics and the Lakers. I don't think that's part of his legacy, but it's a really interesting asterisk and footnote. And he was able to not go out on top, but go out having resurrected himself from that really, truly low point where it went peak Rondo to toilet Rondo, and it seemed like it was overnight.
Yeah, he was a guy that I think early in his career was this, this assist machine. Not early in his career, he developed the assist machine a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
He was a defensive maniac. For the early part of his career.
One of our favorite players, both of us, our favorite players to have watched. Yeah,
love that tenacity. I mean, there were not, even in his early days, and we're talking his early days are like still what, the mid-aughts, right? So like we're not talking about like the early 80s. We're talking about somebody who I appreciated so much because he played the game like with a fire and a passion. Like every play could be his last play.
A Russell Westbrook level of intensity.
Yes, and he got on the floor and he did not like you if you were an opponent.
Mm-hmm.
He was not going to mince words about it. He was not going to glad hand you and pat you on the back. He was going to go out there and try to rip your throat out. And he had like 4 or 5 years where he did like over 11 assists a season.
Yeah.
Like he was the epitome of what I thought when I was growing up a true point guard was.
Yes. I'm glad you said that. Yeah.
And we just don't get many of those guys anymore that don't focus on the scoring. I mean, he was under 10 points a game, I think, in his career average. Like that just was not what he did, what he focused on. This also wasn't a guy who was just bad at shooting. I mean, he wasn't good at shooting, but it wasn't his game. And he focused his game and he tailored his game to being one of the best court visionaries out there. And I've missed him the last few seasons. I know he sort of lost his mind also in the last few seasons too. But I am glad that he was able to end his career sort of on a high note. Not necessarily all the stats and stuff that are out there. It's like 4 or 5 assists a game or something like that. So like half of what he was doing. But to be able to end positively where you can have a positive thought on him, despite the off the court stuff he's having to deal with over the next few weeks. On the court, just a really fun guy to watch.
He is one of those players that, despite all the knocks against him, he deserved to get 2 rings. It was unfortunate that Celtics team only ever got the one.
Unfortunate for Celtics fans, not for me.
Well, right, for sure. But Rondo is one of those guys that, based on like what you said, that tenacity, that talent, he deserves. I'm glad he got 2 rings and he's in that club. And I'll say this, sending him off, Rajon Rondo was, to me, as a passer, the absolute elite passing point guard. He took the flash of Steve Nash and the ability to create crazy angles like Nash did and see crazy angles and make those throws. But then also the fundamental soundness of a Chris Paul, of a John Stockton, where it's a machine level, right? The gears are going up in their head. They're seeing everything way ahead of its development. They are moving the chess pieces around just with head fakes, with ball fakes, with all of that stuff. You know, the flash of a Magic Johnson, the flash of a Steve Nash, but that absolute, whatever you want to call it, the fundamental ability of a Stockton, of a Chris Paul, that was all in the Rajon Rondo package. But then you also got the defensive tenacity and chops of a peak Chris Paul, of a peak John Stockton. But I'll even go one further. You got the peak defensive chops of a Gary Payton type of point guard. Rondo had those flashes when he was, that brief moment of time when he was everything. I look at him in the same way as Kawhi Leonard, and Leonard's done it at a higher level for a little bit longer, but peak Kawhi is like the amalgamation of every great defender that you ever wanted. Rajon Rondo is like peak point guard minus the shooting ability that somebody like a Steve Nash or a Chris Paul or some of the scoring point guards have had. But Rondo defensively and as a passer, man, he had it all. He had it all.
He did. So it's Goodbye to a real one. A chance to officially say goodbye, even though he's been gone for
We
a few years.
appreciate you, man.
Yeah.
We appreciate the chance to have been able to watch.
We're big Rajon Rondo fans here, Basketball by Association. I'm also a big fan of Joel C. Cordes, and that's going to do it for us. Joel C. Cordes gets to say goodbye to the good people right now, Joel.
Find us on Spotify, Spreaker, iTunes, wherever you get your podcast. If you want the audio only version, if you want the video version, you can find us on YouTube. Like, share, subscribe, do all that good stuff. It's been fun, Arky, Shea. It's been real fun.
It's been fun, Joel C. Cordes, and it's also been fun, Mr. Rajon Rondo. We'll see you on the other side, buddy.